I really liked the idea of doing a sort of song by song explanation before the album came out. There's so much that went into writing and making these songs that I really wanted to share with everybody and explain it. And the process of making this album was really cool and different and special, so I wanted to explain that too. And then obviously the album's called The Good Witch, and I liked the idea of having this deck of cards, which is also like you can collect up once we've done the whole thing, all the 15 songs. But each card is symbolic of its own song. I thought it was a cool idea. I'm excited for the fans to hear all of them, but I'm definitely excited for them to hear the song BSC and the song There It Goes. It depends really on the song and the day, but I have a whole list of lyrics and ideas on my phone, and sometimes I'll dive into that, or sometimes it'll be whatever feels inspiring on the day, or the music that's being played, what that lends itself to. So it just really depends on the day in question, but there's never really like one set way. It kind of depends on what the song is itself. I wouldn't say it's like one way or the other, although it's as simple as like the lyric comes first and then the melody. It's normally they're more intertwined. I think that this album, I should probably know an answer to this question. I'm definitely going to be asked it a lot of times.
Or genres, to be specific.
Yeah, I guess I was inspired by a little bit by sort of going back to my roots and the way I started making music, and that sort of more singer-songwriter, sort of the folkier end of what I do, and then also the poppier end of what I do. I think last year I had a lot of fun with the sort of theatre of like big glam rock, and there is a little bit of that in this album, but I think it lends itself much more to sort of how I started out. So the album's called The Good Witch, and it's not really a concept album, but it does chronicle the last year of my life, so I guess you could sort of argue that it conceptualizes my own life. Essentially I wrote it about that, but it has the opening song and the closing song cyclically go with each other. I wrote the closing song, and then from the closing song I wrote the opening song, and they sort of borrow from each other, and the album track listing is loosely chronological, I'll say, loosely. There was a lot of different reasons why I called the album The Good Witch, but I guess that, to me, when I was deciding what reflected the album, which is a hard thing to do because I think the album is very expansive, and so trying to find a few words to summarize an entire year of your life, an entire breadth of like emotion is difficult, and so I found it hard to name this album, but The Good Witch was a title that I had along with some other titles sort of running around from a list. I actually have no idea where it came from, it just sort of was in my mind. And then when I was thinking about the themes within this album, I felt like there was a lot of words that were also felt synonymous with The Good Witch. There was I like the power within The Good Witch and femininity, danger. It feels sort of threatening. It feels benevolent. There's like a kindness and a cruelty, and like it feels like an interesting way to describe oneself, especially as a young woman who makes all of her own music. I like The Good Witch, and I like the destruction it suggests, and also the power it gives the narrator, which is me. That is a good question. I think that it can be a positive thing if you use it to fuel you in a healthy way. But what is it? Is it like comparison is the thief of joy or something? Is that a quote? I think that feels relevant. But yeah, I think if you use it correctly, it can manifest itself in good ways, maybe. But I don't know necessarily if I'm the most equipped to tell you that clearly, because I wrote a song called Body Better. So maybe I'm not. I qualify for that one. Oh, that's such a good question. There are lots of books that would be definitely like within the tapestry of this album. I would say of last year, what I read, or in the last few years what I've read that I feel like will have had a real influence is there's a couple of different books written about sort of modernizing a lot of like Greek mythology. So there's a book called Circe, I'm not sure how you say it. There's like Son of Achilles, there's Silence of the Women, something like that. Sorry, I've got all those titles wrong, it's off the top of my head. But a lot of those books, sort of the modernizing retelling of those Greek myths, and often from a female perspective, I found really inspiring. And there's one song on this album in particular, which is the closing song called History of Man, which I think really, there's a lot of that within that song. And then also my favourite book ever is a book called The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and that also, the girls who get it. And I love that book, and that book's also this sort of really interesting, incorporates Greek mythology in like a really interesting way that I've always been so inspired by, and I love that book, and I read it all the time. So I would say though that world is definitely, the surrealism in that world is a large part of this album.
Thank you so much.
I don't think I'm ever somebody that would be like, this is what you have to learn from any of the music I make. I don't think there's like a fixed thing I want everyone to come away from. I'm not going to like test you at the end. But I would like people, really I would just like people to come away from it and have it be an album that is important to them and sits with them for a long time. Like I think about, a lot of the time when I was making this album, I was thinking about Lord's second album, Melodrama, and I was thinking about how important that album was for me when I was like 17, and how it was like culturally so important for me and my friends, and we all went to see her when she played London, and we still all talk about it. And when I was writing some of these songs, like in the rooms I was writing, it would just sort of come up, which is interesting. I don't really think it sonically sounds that similar, but just the feeling it gave everybody back when it came out, and the way that I still reference it and I still listen to it and I still get something new from it as I get older. And not that many albums, at least for me, only so many can do that for you. And so it's a real honor to have an album that does that for somebody else, and I would love that to be the case for The Good Witch. Yes. What am I going to give you? There's so many lyrics. I guess that there's actually just so many. So many. There's a song called There It Goes. I think I tweeted this the other day, so it's not fully exclusive, but it's pretty exclusive. And in the song There It Goes, I say, let me see if I can say this. I say, the way I loved you, I will not be embarrassed of that, just should have known when to quit. And I think that that's a nice lyric to summarize this album, and summarize the people who listen to it too.